Welcome, guys. Let's discuss more Qigong questions. So today, the first question is from Alex Dow 8042. Okay, thanks a lot, dear Adam. Never heard about each one with a candle. That's actually from Santique, which is from Xingyi and ancestral art of each one. Also, never heard about projecting energy. Heard something like find a point few meters away and focus your eyes there. That is projecting energy if you're using your eyes like that. About people running at you, also very little info. Only visualize sea of sabers and force in front of you. It seems to me you're talking about some advanced level which is not taught much in public lessons. Would you be so kind to elaborate on that? I'm very, very curious. Thanks in advance and great respect to all your efforts. You're very welcome. Actually, there's nothing advanced. It's just, again, that was from the last episode on the Santique. Sorry about that. So basically, you got the mental level and you got the energy level and you get the physical level, right? So when people are doing classical Santique or post training that is on a horizontal plane, they will work on their physical mechanics first, like hanging the spine, tucking in the chin, rounding the back, separating the vertebrae in the spaces, getting the structure of the arms, the right part of the palm, corresponding and coordinated with the other palm, moving from the center. Even though they're not moving, there's mini movements in the center, rooting the legs and synchronizing the elbow with the knees, the hands with the feet, and going forward, right? And then also after that level, you can start working on opening up the spaces more, inflating the rib area, opening up the pores. So that would be like the first level. And then usually when people get a little bit more trained in Xingyi, they would start using bone breathing and pore breathing while they're standing in Santi. Then the next level is the energy level, if you want to call it that, or projecting your mind. Lighting a candle is just a tool, right? Where you're projecting your mind pretty far. Or like in other exercise, you'd be imagining you have a rope pulling a tree, splitting a tree, lifting a tree, pressing a tree, holding down a tiger. Like all these are in each one, which is a sister art of Xingyi. So that would be the energy level, right? And then on the mental level, you might work on like the imagery of a bunch of people charging at you, and yet you're only projecting on one point. And you're saying it seems like it's an advanced level. It's actually not an advanced level. The idea of working on the physical, up to the energy, and up to the mental, that's been around since the classical period, since its infancy. It's nothing mysterious and it's nothing rare. The only reason why it seems rare nowadays is people usually only complete the first level and then they start teaching, which in the old days was a big no-no. You have to learn the whole thing. So what people call advanced level nowadays or rare level is not really accurate. It's more like they didn't learn the whole thing and they went up and proclaimed themselves as a teacher. So a little bit of corruption there, but it's not something mysterious or advanced. It's part of the art since the infancy, right? And when you start doing the physical part, nothing will really happen in terms of draining your energy unless you really overdo it. In fact, you will get stronger and stronger and stronger physically. But at the point of the energetic level where you're projecting and also using your mind and imagining stuff and triggering your adrenaline, that can drain you pretty badly, right? So when you do the horizontal type of post training, rather it drains you or not, depending on which level you're at. The more you're projecting your mind and imagining a combat scenario, the more it is going to drain you. So the vertical post training, the original Taoism was for healing, not for fighting purposes. So when you work on a vertical plane, it doesn't drain you and it stores your energy. When you work on a horizontal type of projection for combat, that stuff tends to drain you. That's just the nature of combat. So it's very important, at least in a classical time, which in modern times sometimes people forget, and that is when you work on a horizontal plane, it's important to right away double the time on a vertical plane so you don't drain your energy. And this is really important if you pass the age of, let's say, 45, in which you get drained pretty easily if you start working on intensive combative stuff, right? So it all depends on age. If you're like 20 something, then it really doesn't matter. You can go horizontal all day, take a nap, and you're fine again, right? So I hope that answers that question. But it kind of distract like us or most of my students that's in the Qigong program because we're more interested in healing than we are in using projections for combat. Although when I teach martial art, I do introduce my students to that if they request it, but it's not something I want them to really work on a lot because, again, it drains people, right? There are other ways to tap into your mind for combat and efficiency that doesn't drain you so much. So, anyways, all right. If you want to know more about it, you can post a question below and we can discuss it some more. But I'll leave that for now. I'll leave you with that. So, the next question is from Al Swingen 9274. I hope I pronounced your name right. Even though I do daily exercise, stretching to stay in shape, as well as empty my mind, walking in nature, I notice I still do things that block progression. It seems like self sabotage. It is hard for me to overcome bad habits. Any comment is fine. That's actually really, really common, right? Usually when people are online discussing martial art and qigong, there seems to be a lot of knowledge dropping, argument, and debates about what is right and what is wrong. But that centers around the arena of information because we live in an information age. So people fuss over that, the right and wrong way of knowledge, even though most of the time it's not through direct experience. So it's kind of intellectual, like just thinking, right? Just projection. And it's not based on direct experience, so it doesn't have much merit in terms of efficiency. But it doesn't change the fact that you're hung up on knowledge because we live in an information age. But information and knowledge is not really the problem of why people get sick and can't heal themselves. It's got to do with a lack of consistent action. So people are getting hung up on the wrong, no, I shouldn't say wrong, but they're getting hung up on the insignificant part of it, right? Because it's not about the know how. Nowadays, if you're willing to do some research, it's not that hard to get information on anything. And if you're willing to do a bit of traveling and a lot of research, it's not that hard to find a good teacher. Rather, you get acceptance when you apply to become a student, that's a separate issue. But with sincerity and a good heart, it's not that hard to get accepted into most schools, anyways. So, information is not the problem. The reason why most people don't end up achieving their goal is not a lack of information, but it's a lack of consistency. Whereas you would say self sabotage, right? And this kind of breaks my heart because there's people that I know, friends and family, that are not feeling too well. And I know this firsthand because for those that follow my work, I was really, really sick about 5 years ago, and Western and Eastern medicine couldn't heal me. What healed me was Qigong. And that's the reason why I did a 360 in my career. And I decided my main mission nowadays is to share Qigong and hopefully people that are suffering can also get healed. And so when there's people that are close to me in terms of friends and family and they're not feeling well and I offer Qigong to them for free, like I'll go to their house and teach them if they want just to make them feel better. The sad thing is most of them don't want to start, and the ones that start are not consistent. So it's not a lack of information. It is a lack of consistency. And there's many reasons for that. Sadder than the ones that don't start. A sadder case for me is when people do start and they do train and they slowly start to feel better, mentally and physically. And all of a sudden they drop off. And then when I ask them, hey, you said you were feeling a lot better. Why did you stop? Without lying, being 100% honest, they will say, I don't know. And that's, to me, is the saddest thing. So it's the same as when I was teaching martial art. It's not a problem of information. It's a problem of consistency. And if we, sidetrack a little bit into martial art is a more concrete example because it's more physical and people can relate to it more. Nowadays, you can learn anything. If you want to learn grappling, there's Shui Jiao, there's Judo, there's BJJ, there's Greco wrestling. If you're into weapons, there's African weaponry, there's Filipino martial arts, there's Chinese, Japanese, Spanish martial art. If you want to learn how to punch, there's boxing. If you want to learn internal martial art, there's Tai Chi, Bagua, Xingyi, Sistema. If you're into trapping, there's Wing Chun. There's a million martial arts out there. No, hundreds of martial arts out there. Most of the time, you can find a pretty good teacher. Most of the time, it's easy to apply and get accepted as a student. So information is not the problem. But why is it that most people that do martial art usually stay pretty average, and maybe only 2 to 5% of people get really good? And it's the same as sports, same as music, same as anything. It's because people are not consistent. And we usually chalk that up to a lack of discipline and a lack of willpower. Like you're weak, you can't stick to anything. You don't have the drive, you don't have the motivation. So people usually end up giving themselves shit and use a lot of willpower to try to muscle through it. But that's not sustainable. And usually that's why you see New Year resolution, right? People have goals, they try to use their willpower. And what happened after a few months is they quit. So it has to be something a lot deeper than just willpower and discipline. It has to be a path, a lifestyle. It can't be just something you do because it's an activity that you try to muscle through. Training is part of your life. It's like brushing your teeth and taking a shower. It's got to be a part of your being and a part of your lifestyle. It's not something you do because you're in the mood and then don't do it because you're not in the mood. You do it because you have discipline. You don't do it because you have no discipline. It's not like that. It's kind of like it's part of a meaning, right? It's kind of like taking care of your wife or your kids when they're sick. You don't do it only when you're in the mood and then stop doing it when you're not in the mood. It's got nothing to do with mood. It's got nothing to do with discipline. It's got nothing to do with willpower because it's got something to do deeper with love, because you care. So instead of thinking of it like you're muscling through of your discipline and willpower, you gotta, it's more a compassion towards yourself, right? And Buddha said it best, your compassion is not complete if it doesn't start and includes yourself. So instead of using a yang aspect, burning fuel and fire and beating yourself up and giving yourself a hard time and trying to muscle through with willpower and discipline, like a lot of self-help industry will try to guilt people into improving. Instead of using that approach, I find a more sustainable approach for long term is to show yourself more compassion. Like, look, you know what happens if you don't do this consistently. You know what happens if you do it consistently, whether it's diet, exercise, any health habit, right? So Qigong is the same. You can have the best Qigong teacher on the planet, but if you don't have consistent action, it's not going to work. It just doesn't work. The same thing with lifting weights, same thing with running, same thing with martial art. Whatever you're doing or not doing, whatever decision and behavior you're making, you directly pay for it in terms of consequence, right? So instead of trying to muscle through stuff, which just doesn't work on the long term, you want to think of it more, sit down and contemplate and try to develop some compassion for yourself. Ironically, there's a lot of meditative exercise for that in the heart center. But even that's not going to work if no one's going to practice, right? You got to give yourself a chance. And talking about this is weird for me because I taught martial art for a long time, over 20 years, and now I'm teaching Qigong. And the same thing happens. And a lot of my friends are teachers, right? They teach languages, they teach music, they teach yoga, they teach Qigong. A lot of my friends teach martial arts. And when I talk to them, it's always the same problem. It's not an information problem. It's people can't stick to stuff. Especially nowadays with social media and the phones and the computer, people want things instantly. If they can't have it right away, they drop off right away. But anything that's worth building, whether it's business, relationship, martial art, qigong, anything, takes time. So if you look at a plant growing, it doesn't grow overnight. This stuff is common sense up here. But until it is in your bones, until you can feel it, it doesn't do you any good, right? And it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's martial art or qigong or anything. It's important for people to go through the process of starting from the bottom and slowly getting good at something. And that becomes a reference point in their life. And if this pattern repeats itself enough time, the internal struggle of trying to make yourself do something goes away. That negative voice in your head goes away because you have developed a habit of training consistently. Before I got really, really sick, I did martial arts I was 45 when I got really sick. So I already did martial art for 34 years, right? So, and out of that 34 years, 24 years was full time, 5 days and no, 6 days and 4 nights a week. So my nervous system was already 100% used to training consistently, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and the enjoyment that comes out of it, right? So when I got really sick and nothing worked, and I end up starting qigong full time, about 4 hours a day every single day, it was difficult to start qigong for me because I was really sick. At that time, I was always dizzy. I was getting sick all the time. I was getting brain fog. I was throwing up all the time. Allergies were acting up. I had high blood pressure, anxiety, depression, everything because my whole nervous system was crashing, right? So practicing itself was hard, but getting myself to try every single day wasn't hard at all because I was used to doing that from martial art, training every single day. Actually getting good at this stuff was hard because I was so sick. So that's the difference, right? In other words, when you get used to training every single day in one domain, automatically it transferred to all domains. That's what I found of the best lesson I learned in martial art, and that is to consistently train. And people, even when you say the word train, some people get intimidated, right? Because they frame it as some kind of uphill, hardcore, willpower, self-torturing activity. But it's not like that. It's more like you gently lifting something up. You gently growing something slowly, gradually, without any expectancy of something happening fast. So it's kind of like cooking a meal, right? You're not rushing through it. Imagine you're cooking a meal and you're trying to make it as good as possible for someone you care about. That's very different than cooking because you're getting paid for it. It's a job you hate and you're trying to rush through it because there's 10 tables waiting for the food. Complete different feeling, right? One is like an art, an activity of care, and the other one is like something you don't give a shit about. So, and that's how people frame training most of the time. They frame it like, I don't really want to do it, but I want the benefit. But I don't really want to do it. I just want the benefit. So they're living for the future, right? So that implies a lot of struggle, internal struggle. Instead of doing that, try to stay present with the activity. Before the activity, contemplate on self-compassion of why you need to do it. But during the activity, don't think about getting the future reward or benefit. Just focus on the activity without any expectation. Do it gradually, do it slowly. If you can hold that kind of attitude, you open a space for joy to come in, and it builds momentum. So next thing you know, you look forward to the activity. I don't know if I answered your question, but I hope that kind of helped you, right? Because that's actually the most important problem. I mean, talking about qigong is easy. Talking about martial art is easy, but no information will help anybody if they lack consistent action, right? And this is especially true for people that are sick. Usually, like one time I was in an emergency room. It was actually pretty recent. I took my wife to that hospital, and the Canadian hospital system is really terrible right now. I think we waited 15 hours in the emergency room. Everybody was in pain. Everybody was waiting a very long time. And then I couldn't help it when I look around that looking at people's faces and looking at their body type and looking at the way they are and the way they sat, their posture, the way they talk to the nurse and other people. I mean, this sounds shitty to say, but to be honest, it felt like about 80% of the people I was looking at in the emergency room that was not feeling well didn't seem to me like the type of people that took any responsibility in how they lived their life in terms of eating and exercising. They seemed like they didn't take much responsibility for their health. And they're sitting in the waiting room in a hospital waiting 15 hours to be treated. My judgment or my assessment could be not accurate. But looking at how out of shape most people were, I was kind of like, well, it's a matter of time before you walk in here, right? Unless there's something genetic, chronic, accidental, then it's different. But from talking to health professionals, at least when I was really sick, a lot of illness come from lifestyle. And most people don't take any responsibility for their lifestyle, so the result is being sick. And yet they don't want to do the work to heal themselves. Instead, they expect someone else to do the work for them, and they expect that work to be done instantaneously, or they complain. So with that kind of attitude, what's the chances of that person sustaining a healthy mind and body? That's something, I mean, you can judge it left or right, but it's something that really stuck in my mind, and I started contemplating the crap out of it, right? And it made a huge difference in my practice when I did. So anyways, I'll leave it with that. Okay, and then as an announcement, this week we are working on post training, but with spontaneous movement injected into it. And that's a very different type of common post training because it's more classical. It's more Zhou Dynasty type of post training, where instead of trying to hold something and charge your body, which works pretty good too, when you inject the spontaneous movement, it allows you to release tension more, and it connects on a vertical plane more. Basically, what it does is it results in way more energy circulation. And that was the exact method that I used to heal my chronic fatigue years ago. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is because I think a couple episodes back, someone asked, sometimes when I hit and when I took pressure in martial art, where does that come from? Does it come from post training? It does, but it only comes from this type of post training. It doesn't come from the classical holding, not classical, sorry, modern version of holding the ball type of post training. It's more like the freestyle, free flow, spontaneous movement type of post training injected into regular standing like a tree. This probably doesn't make much sense. But anyways, that's what we're working on this week, and is really good for people that are suffering from a lack of energy or chronic fatigue and brain fog. So if you're interested, follow the link below in the description. All right, see you next episode, guys.